My name is Brianna, and I've always prided myself on being a good wife to Anthony, my husband of 5 years. Anthony is a welder, his hands rough from the work, but gentle when they touch me. We live in a small cozy house in a quiet neighborhood, where everyone knows everyone. I work as a barista at a local coffee shop, where I serve smiles along with the lattes. Life was simple, predictable, and for the most part happy. Our routine was set. Anthony would leave early for work, his boots echoing in the quiet morning as he stepped out into the dawn. I'd follow soon after, the aroma of coffee beans greeting me as I entered the shop. Evenings were spent together, sometimes with friends, often just the two of us watching movies or cooking dinner. But lately I felt an itch, a restlessness that I couldn't quite place. It started subtly, like a whisper in the back of my mind, growing louder with each passing day. I found myself staring out the window of the coffee shop, watching the world go by, wondering if there was more out there for me. The routine that once felt comforting now seemed like a cage, its bars invisible but unyielding. I remember one evening as Anthony and I sat on our porch, the sun setting behind the houses, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He was talking about his day, the usual tales of welding and work, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the customers at the coffee shop, their stories, their dreams, their escapes. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. The walls of our bedroom, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in. Anthony's steady breathing beside me was a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I turned to look at him, his face peaceful in sleep, and I wondered if he ever felt this way, if he ever yearned for something more than what we had. The next morning, as I prepared for work, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes seemed different, not just tired but searching, as if looking for something I couldn't name. At the coffee shop, I served the regulars, their faces familiar, their orders predictable. But today, each interaction felt like a performance, my smile a mask hiding the turmoil within. As the day wore on, my thoughts kept drifting to the life Anthony and I had built. It was a good life, a life many would envy, but why did it feel so suffocating? Why did the predictability that once brought comfort now feel like a noose around my neck? That evening, as we sat down to dinner, I tried to engage with Anthony, to find some semblance of the contentment we once shared. But the words felt hollow, and the silence between us was heavy with unspoken questions. I knew something had to change, but what? Could I disrupt the life we had so carefully constructed? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As I cleared the dishes, I glanced at Anthony, his face illuminated by the soft light of the kitchen, and I realized that the restlessness within me wasn't just about seeking something new. It was about understanding what I truly wanted from life, from love, from myself. And so the seed of change was planted, not with a dramatic event or a sudden revelation, but with a quiet, persistent question that echoed in the chambers of my heart. What could possibly change in our seemingly perfect life? It was a typical Thursday, the shop bustling with the usual crowd. That's when Gabrielle walked in. Gabrielle, with their striking features and an aura that seemed to command the room, ordered a caramel macchiato. They were new in town, just moved here for a job, they said. We chatted, and I found myself drawn to their stories of travel and adventure, a stark contrast to my daily routine. There was something about Gabrielle that made the ordinary seem extraordinary. Their eyes sparkled with tales of distant lands, of cultures I'd only read about in books. They spoke of the freedom they found in embracing their identity as a ladyboy, a journey filled with both struggle and triumph. I admired their courage, their vibrancy. It was like watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon, right there in the middle of my coffee shop. Over the next few weeks, Gabrielle became a regular, and our conversations grew longer, deeper. They shared stories of their life, the challenges of living authentically in a world that often didn't understand. Each visit, they brought with them a piece of the world, a reminder of the vastness beyond our small town. I found myself looking forward to their visits, the highlight of my day amidst the monotony of lattes and cappuccinos. Gabrielle's presence was like a breath of fresh air, stirring something within me that I hadn't felt in years. Their laughter, their insights, it all made me question the life I was living, the life I thought was enough. One afternoon, as I handed Gabrielle their usual drink, they mentioned a local art exhibit they were planning to attend. "You should come," they suggested with a smile that seemed to light up the room. I hesitated, thinking of Anthony, of our routine. But the idea of stepping out, of experiencing something new was too tempting. I agreed, and that evening, I found myself at the gallery, surrounded by art that spoke of freedom, of expression, of breaking boundaries. Gabrielle was there, their enthusiasm infectious as they explained the nuances of each piece. We talked about art, about life, about the courage to be oneself. As we walked through the exhibit, I felt a shift, a subtle but undeniable change within me. Gabrielle's stories, their life, it was all so different from what I knew. They spoke of living life on their terms, of not letting societal norms dictate their happiness. It was liberating, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a connection, a kinship with someone who understood the feeling of being trapped by expectations. The night ended with us sitting on a bench outside the gallery, the cool night air a stark contrast to the warmth of our conversation. Gabrielle's hand brushed mine, a simple gesture, but it sent a jolt through me. It wasn't about attraction, not in the way I'd known with Anthony, but about a connection, a shared understanding of wanting more from life. As I returned home that night, the house was dark, Anthony already asleep. I slipped into bed, my mind racing with thoughts of freedom, of change. The seed of change that had been planted was now sprouting, its roots digging deep into my heart. The next morning, as I prepared for work, I caught my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were different, not just searching but determined. At the coffee shop, I served the regulars, but now, each interaction felt like a step towards something new. Gabrielle's influence was undeniable, their stories echoing in my mind, pushing me towards a path I hadn't considered before. That evening, as Anthony and I sat down to dinner, I tried to share my day, my thoughts, but the words felt hollow. The silence between us was heavy, filled with the unspoken realization that our lives were at a crossroads. I looked at him, his face illuminated by the soft light of the kitchen, and I knew that the restlessness within me was not just about seeking something new. It was about understanding what I truly wanted from life, from love, from myself. And so the question lingered, growing louder with each passing day. What would happen when this new friendship began to blur the lines of my marriage? One evening, after Anthony had left for his night shift, Gabrielle invited me to a secluded villa they had rented for a weekend getaway. They described it as a place of peace, a retreat from the world. Curiosity and a sense of adventure I hadn't felt in years pushed me to accept. The drive to the villa was filled with anticipation, the road winding through dense woods, the headlights cutting through the darkness. When we arrived, the villa stood like a silent sentinel amidst the lush greenery, the gentle sound of a nearby stream adding to the serene atmosphere. Inside, the villa was a blend of rustic charm and modern comfort. Gabrielle had prepared everything with care, from the soft lighting to the aromatic candles that filled the air with a soothing scent. We talked, laughed, and as the night deepened, something shifted. Gabrielle's touch was different, softer, yet it ignited a fire within me that I hadn't known existed. Their fingers brushed against mine as we shared a bottle of wine, their eyes holding mine in a gaze that felt both comforting and thrilling. In the dim light of the villa, we crossed a line. The physical connection was not just a betrayal of my vows, but a revelation of my own desires. Desires I had never acknowledged or explored. It was a moment of intense intimacy, where the world outside ceased to exist, and all that mattered was the here and now. The morning after was filled with a mix of guilt and exhilaration. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. Gabrielle was already up, their silhouette framed by the window, looking out at the tranquil landscape. I joined them, wrapping a robe around me, feeling the weight of what had transpired. "What does this mean for us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Gabrielle turned, their expression unreadable for a moment before softening into a smile. "It means we've shared something profound, something real," they said. "But what it means for your life, for your marriage, that's something only you can decide." The drive back was silent, each of us lost in our thoughts. The world outside seemed unchanged, yet everything felt different. As I approached my home, the familiar sight of our cozy house felt both comforting and confining. Anthony was still asleep when I entered, his form peaceful under the covers. I stood there watching him, feeling the chasm that had grown between us. The seed of change had not only sprouted but had begun to alter the landscape of my life in ways I couldn't yet fathom. I slipped back into bed, careful not to wake him, but sleep eluded me. My mind replayed the night, the touch, the connection, and the stark contrast to the life I had built with Anthony. The question that had been lingering now screamed in my mind. What would this night mean for my marriage, for my life? As the days passed, the villa became a symbol of my internal conflict. Each morning at the coffee shop, I served the regulars with a facade of normalcy, but inside, I was wrestling with my desires, my guilt, and the undeniable pull towards something more, something different. Gabrielle continued to visit, our conversations now laced with an unspoken understanding. They never pushed, never demanded, but their presence was a constant reminder of the night we shared, of the freedom I tasted, and the life I was questioning. One evening, as Anthony and I sat down to dinner, the silence was heavier than ever. I tried to engage, to find some semblance of our old connection, but the words felt hollow. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not just my husband but a man who had built a life with me, a life I was now questioning. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about seeking something new. It was about understanding what I truly wanted from life, from love, from myself. The restlessness within me was not a fleeting itch but a deep-seated need for authenticity, for living true to my desires. And so the question lingered, growing louder with each passing day. What would happen when this new friendship began to blur the lines of my marriage? The answer was not clear, but the path ahead was undeniable. I was at a crossroads, and the choice I made would define not just my future but the essence of who I was becoming. The morning after, reality hit like a cold wave. Guilt, confusion, and a strange sense of liberation battled within me. I returned home, the scent of Gabrielle still on me, my heart racing with every step. Anthony was due back from his shift soon, and I was a mess of emotions. I tried to act normal, to slip back into my role as the loving wife, but every look, every touch from Anthony felt like an accusation. The weight of my secret was crushing. As I moved through the house, straightening cushions, wiping down counters, I couldn't shake the feeling that every object in our home was a silent witness to my betrayal. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, each second a reminder of the time I had spent away, the time I had spent with Gabrielle. I stood in the kitchen, the smell of coffee brewing, a routine so ingrained in our lives, but now it felt like a performance. The coffee pot hissed and I jumped, my nerves frayed. I poured myself a cup, my hands trembling, the steam rising like my guilt, clouding the air around me. Could I keep this hidden, or would the truth inevitably surface? The question haunted me as I heard the front door open. Anthony's heavy boots thudded against the floor, each step echoing in my chest. He entered the kitchen, his face tired but warm with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey love," he said, his voice rough from the night shift. He leaned in to kiss me and I turned my cheek, the contact sending a shiver down my spine. His brow furrowed slightly, a silent question in his eyes. "Rough night?" I managed, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "Yeah, the usual," he replied, moving past me to grab a cup of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Everything okay?" I nodded, the lie tasting bitter. "Just didn't sleep well." "How was work?" He launched into a story about a complex weld he had to redo, his hands moving as he spoke, the same hands that had once felt so comforting. Now they seemed like they could uncover my secrets with a single touch. As he talked, I watched him, trying to find the man I had married in this stranger before me. His passion for his work, his dedication, it was all there, but I felt detached, as if I was observing from outside our life. The conversation shifted to mundane things, the weather, plans for the weekend, but each word felt like a step further into a lie. I wanted to tell him, to unburden myself, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, I listened, nodding, smiling, all the while feeling the villa's serene landscape flash before my eyes, Gabrielle's touch, their understanding gaze. Dinner was a quiet affair. The clink of cutlery against plates was the only sound, filling the silence that stretched between us. I tried to engage, to find some semblance of our old connection, but the words felt hollow. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not just my husband but a man who had built a life with me, a life I was now questioning. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about seeking something new. It was about understanding what I truly wanted from life, from love, from myself. The restlessness within me was not a fleeting itch, but a deep-seated need for authenticity, for living true to my desires. As we cleared the dishes, I glanced at Anthony, his face illuminated by the soft light of the kitchen, and I knew that the restlessness within me was not just about seeking something new. It was about understanding what I truly wanted from life, from love, from myself. And so, the question lingered, growing louder with each passing day. What would happen when this new friendship began to blur the lines of my marriage? The answer was not clear, but the path ahead was undeniable. I was at a crossroads, and the choice I made would define not just my future, but the essence of who I was becoming. The night stretched on, and I lay beside Anthony, his breathing steady and deep, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. Sleep was elusive, my mind replaying the night at the villa, the touch, the connection, and the stark contrast to the life I had built with Anthony. I turned to look at him, his face peaceful in sleep, and I wondered if he ever felt this way, if he ever yearned for something more than what we had. The seed of change that had been planted was now sprouting, its roots digging deep into my heart, altering the landscape of my life in ways I couldn't yet fathom. The morning light would soon creep through the curtains, and with it, another day of decisions, of choices that would shape not just my future, but the very essence of who I was becoming. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but one thing was clear. The life I had known was irrevocably changed, and the journey to find what I truly wanted was just beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the secret festered like a wound left untended. One evening, while Anthony was sorting through the mail, he found an envelope with pictures from the villa. Pictures of me and Gabrielle, intimate, undeniable. His face turned pale, his hands shook as he held the photos. I was in the kitchen, the aroma of dinner filling the air, when I heard the sound of paper being crumpled. I turned to see Anthony standing there, his expression a mix of confusion and pain. The envelope lay discarded on the floor, the photos scattered like leaves in the wind. "Anthony, what's wrong?" My voice was a whisper, barely audible over the pounding of my heart. He didn't answer immediately, just stared at me with eyes that seemed to search for the woman he thought he knew. Then, in a voice that was both calm and terrifyingly cold, he said, "What is this, Brianna?" The confrontation was explosive. Tears, accusations, and a pain so raw it felt like our world was collapsing. I confessed, not just to the physical act, but to the emotional turmoil that led me there. I told him about the restlessness, the feeling of being trapped, the connection with Gabrielle that felt like a lifeline in the sea of our routine. Anthony's hurt was palpable, his trust shattered. He paced the room, his hands running through his hair, his voice rising with each question. "Why? How could you do this to us? To me?" I tried to explain, but words felt inadequate. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Anthony. I was lost, searching for something, and Gabrielle was there, understanding in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't just about them, it was about me, about feeling alive again." He stopped pacing, his gaze piercing through me. "Alive? And what am I to you then, Brianna? Dead weight?" No, that's not what I meant," I pleaded, my voice breaking. "I love you, Anthony, but I've been so lost, so confused. I needed to find myself again." The silence that followed was deafening. Anthony sat down, his head in his hands, the weight of betrayal heavy on his shoulders. "I trusted you," he murmured, his voice muffled. "I thought we had something real." "We do," I insisted, moving closer, but he recoiled, the space between us now a chasm. "We can work through this, can't we? I want to make this right." He looked up, his eyes red, his face a mask of sorrow. "I don't know, Brianna. I really don't know. How can I look at you and not see those pictures? How can I trust you again?" The room seemed to shrink around us, the walls closing in with every heartbeat. I felt the gravity of my actions, the irreversible damage to our bond. "I'm so sorry, Anthony. I never wanted to hurt you. I lost my way." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I need time, Brianna. Time to think, to process. I can't just pretend this didn't happen." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here, trying to make things right." Anthony walked out of the room, his steps heavy, each one echoing the fracture in our marriage. I was left alone with the remnants of our life together. The dinner now cold, the photos a stark reminder of my betrayal. As the night deepened, I sat in the dim light of our living room, the silence enveloping me. The question that had haunted me for weeks now screamed in my mind. Would this be the end of us, or could we find a way through this storm? The path ahead was obscured by shadows, each step fraught with uncertainty. I knew I had to confront not just the consequences of my actions, but also the deeper desires and needs that had driven me to this point. The journey to understanding what I truly wanted from life, from love, from myself, was just beginning, and it was clear that the life I had known was irrevocably changed. In the aftermath of the storm that had torn through our lives, Anthony and I sought counseling. The journey was painful, filled with arguments, tears, and moments of silence so heavy they seemed to suffocate us. Each session was a battlefield where we laid bare our souls, confronting not just the betrayal but the underlying currents that had led us to this point. I remember one session vividly where the counselor, a kind woman with eyes that seemed to see through our facades, asked us to describe what we felt when we looked at each other now. Anthony spoke first, his voice low, almost a whisper. "I see a stranger, someone I thought I knew but now feels like a ghost of the woman I married." His words cut deep, and I felt the sting of tears. When it was my turn, I struggled to find the words. I see the man I love, but also the life we built, now in ruins. I see my own reflection, distorted by my choices. Through these sessions, we began to peel back the layers of our relationship. Anthony learned about my feelings of confinement, my need for exploration, not just of the world but of myself. I learned about his fears, his insecurities, how my actions had not only broken his trust, but had also shaken his sense of self-worth. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, we sat in our car, the silence between us less oppressive than before. Anthony turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "I'm scared, Brianna." "Scared of losing you, scared of what we've become." "I'm scared too," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But maybe through this fear we can find something new, something real." We decided to stay together, not out of obligation, but because we found a new respect for each other's complexities. Our marriage was forever changed, but not necessarily for the worse. We opened up our relationship, allowing for honesty about desires and needs, something we had never truly practiced before. Gabrielle moved away, their departure bittersweet. They had been a catalyst for change, a mirror reflecting back the parts of myself I had ignored. Their presence in our lives had been brief but profound, leaving behind lessons about authenticity and the courage to live one's truth. The transformation was gradual. We started by setting new boundaries, by talking openly about what we wanted from life, from each other. Anthony took up painting, something he had always wanted to try but never had the courage to pursue. I began to write, capturing my thoughts, my journey, in a way I had never done before. One night, as we sat on our porch, the stars twinkling above, Anthony reached for my hand. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice steady, "about what we've been through, and I realize now it's not just about forgiving you. It's about forgiving myself for not seeing, for not understanding." I squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his touch, a touch that now felt like a promise of renewal. And I've learned that seeking something more doesn't mean I didn't love what we had. It's about growing together. Our relationship became a work in progress, a canvas where we painted our new lives with strokes of honesty, vulnerability, and an acceptance of each other's imperfections. The house, once a symbol of confinement, now felt like a space where we could both breathe, explore, and evolve. And so what began as a story of infidelity turned into a tale of transformation, of finding love in the ruins of betrayal. We learned that love isn't just about the easy days, the laughter, and the comfort. It's also about navigating the storms, about rebuilding, about choosing each other, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. In the end, our journey wasn't just about surviving the aftermath. It was about thriving in the new world we were creating together. With every step forward, every honest conversation, every moment of silence now filled with understanding rather than judgment. The path ahead was still uncertain, but we walked it hand in hand, knowing that whatever came, we would face it as a united front, transformed by the trials we had endured. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.